Chapter 753. Chief of Overall Protection. Under the night sky, Shin Qingzhu held a cigarette in one hand and supported a compressed fireball with the power comparable to a nuclear explosion in the other, calmly walking towards the insect disaster before him. The glowing ring in the insect disaster's eyes locked onto the fireball, and after analyzing its terrifying power, her expression immediately turned grim. "Are you crazy? Such a massive amount of energy could instantly vaporize all of Tokyo," the insect disaster growled at Shin Qingzhu. Shin Qingzhu continued to walk calmly, the fireball in his hand growing increasingly hot, yet he showed no intention of responding to her. After all, he couldn't understand what the insect disaster was saying at all. Seeing the indifference and calmness in Shin Qingzhu's eyes, the insect disaster suddenly felt a pang of panic. This man seemed to completely disregard the lives of the people in this city. He was a thorough madman. The insect disaster's eyes sparkled with determination. After hesitating for a moment, she shot towards Shin Qingzhu like an arrow, her wide sleeves continuously releasing poisonous insects, transforming into a sea of bluish-purple that instantly engulfed the wide street. To stop that fireball from exploding, she had to directly poison this madman before he unleashed its power. Shin Qingzhu held the massive fireball with a radius of over 100 meters, calmly watching the wave of poisonous insects before him, his eyes narrowing slightly. A few beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. Although he pretended to be relaxed on the surface, in reality his physical condition was already at its limit. What he was holding was the total heat released from the fire, enough to destroy the entire population of Tokyo, numbering in the millions. If this fireball exploded, not only would the Oracle Envoy perish, but most of the other members of the Nightfall team would likely not survive either. This thing was like a nuclear bomb, a true indiscriminate attack. During this process, he needed to compress this heat to its limit using Qi Min while also controlling the internal gas composition, maintaining the fireball in a stable state at all times. Such a massive amount of energy was an enormous burden for him. Holding this fireball, he couldn't even engage in direct combat with the insect disaster, let alone move quickly. If he lost his balance for even a moment, it would mean the end for the entire city. He needed a little more time. Shin Qingzhu's left hand, which held the cigarette, began to tremble slightly. Jiang Er knew Shin Qingzhu's current physical condition. Controlling the fire, she stabilized the heat in Shin Qingzhu's hand while rapidly moving closer to him. The fire had already poured all its energy into the fireball, and its combat effectiveness was rapidly declining. Engaging the insect disaster would likely not last long, but there was no other way to deal with the current situation. Buzzing. At that moment, the sound of engines roaring from afar echoed through the air. Blinding headlights pierced the pitch-black night like swords, as one black vehicle after another rushed in from the end of the road, their bodies covered in mud, having come from who knows how far away. The engines of over 100 cars were pushed to their limits, creating a deafening low roar. The terrifying fireball hovered in the center of the street, glaringly hot like the sun, and all the pedestrians had already fled in terror. Yet despite this, these vehicles still floored the gas pedal, charging recklessly towards this direction. Fearless. That was. Shin Qingzhu's pupils constricted slightly as he saw the charging convoy. Among the vehicles, the dark windows rolled down one by one. In the front car, Jing Shouyu leaned halfway out of the window, the howling wind tousling his hair. He squinted at Shin Qingzhu, who stood not far away holding the fireball, and laughed loudly in the wind. "Captain, the entire Black Kill team has entered Tokyo, fighting alongside you." Immediately after, one figure after another leaned out of the windows. "Captain, we're here to help you. Captain, we won't let you fight alone. Leaving us behind to fight, Captain, that's too much. Isn't it just the Oracle Envoy? Brothers aren't afraid. Let's take him down. Captain, you're so cool. Everyone protect the captain." Amidst the shouts in a Kansai dialect mixed with playful tones, the hundreds of black vehicles showed no signs of slowing down as they surged past Shin Qingzhu, charging straight into the oncoming wave of poisonous insects. One car after another roared past Shin Qingzhu, the wind they created billowing his flowing cloak. Shin Qingzhu stood there, stunned, holding the fireball that could destroy Tokyo. He risked his life for them. They risked their lives for him. No one knew where this group of people who once lived like rats in the shadows of the city found the courage to drive in laughter towards the figure in the green robe that symbolized supreme divine authority. In this country, in this city with a population of 50 million, the first to awaken were the underworld. They were the so-called minor evils that were not even worthy of being included in the Oracle Envoy's wanted list. They were small, they were despicable, they were despised by everyone in this country, but at this moment in this circle of people that had knelt before 50 million, they were the only ones standing. They stood because someone told them they should not live like this. What that person held in one hand was not the massive fireball that would destroy Tokyo, but the sky-named shackles that had once pressed down on them, making it hard for them to breathe. Now they were willing to give their lives for that person. Jing Shoyu pulled out a submachine gun from the car, stepped out and slammed the car door shut. He stood at the forefront of the insect tide, shouting at the sky. "Everyone open fire." Tat 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 tat. Dense gunfire flickered in the darkness, barely holding back the surging insect disaster with the barrage of bullets, momentarily stalling its advance. However, these poisonous insects were cultivated using technological means by the insect disaster, and the damage that bullets could inflict was limited. They could only temporarily hold them back with kinetic force. Even so, a large number of large poisonous insects broke through the blockade, crashing into the Black Kill Team's defensive line and tearing at their bodies. The members of the Black Kill Team were all ordinary people, many of whom had never received professional combat training. Once these poisonous insects got close, there was no chance of survival. Meanwhile, the insect disaster completely ignored the Black Kill Team's firepower, darting into the crowd like a shadow, crazily reaping the lives of the Black Kill Team members. With every wave of her hand, she effortlessly slaughtered large numbers of lives, like a farmer wielding a sickle, leaving devastation in her wake. Insect corpses and human corpses lay on the ground, blood flowing down the street in a steady stream. Chapter 754. The Great Leaders Competition. Shin Qingzhu watched the scene unfold, his eyes instantly turning red as he fixed his gaze on the green figure dancing among the crowd, his anger boiling over. "Looking for death?" Shin Qingzhu growled, his mental energy surging as he poured it all into the massive fireball in his palm. The fireball, exuding a strong sense of destruction, was immediately compressed further, a brilliant white light blending into the fiery red glow. Even with the vacuum wall in place, the terrifying heat wave continued to devour everything around it. He turned to the fire disaster controlled by Jiang Air and shouted, "No need to stabilize the fireball for me, I can handle it myself. Help me launch him into the sky." The fire disaster nodded, lowering both hands. The fire lines connecting to the fireball snapped, and he crouched slightly, flames surging from beneath his feet as he shot forward like a cannonball. A figure in red zipped through the rain of bullets and the swarm of insects. The insect disaster had just killed 4 members of the Black Kill Team and was about to make a move when it suddenly sensed something and turned sharply to look behind. The fire disaster had already charged right in front of her. The insect disaster tried to dodge, but it was too late. The figure in red suddenly embraced the figure in green, then pushed off the ground with all its might. A torrent of flames erupted from beneath their feet, and the two shot into the pitch-black night sky like rockets. "This is bad." The insect disaster realized something, her heart sinking. Poisonous insects frantically crawled up the fire disaster's body, biting at him, but since the body of the oracle was modified, neither the poison nor the bites could inflict fatal damage in a short time. As they ascended, the fire disaster's body began to break apart, yet he held onto the insect disaster's metallic skeleton without any sign of loosening. The ground quickly receded from the insect disaster's view. In just a moment, she and the fire disaster had soared to an altitude of 3 kilometers above the ground. On the ground, Shin Qingzhu held the blinding fireball, squinting at the fiery figure rapidly ascending into the night sky, a chilling, killing intent flashing in his eyes. He swung his arm violently, manipulating the air surrounding the fireball and forcefully throwing it. That massive fireball, with a radius of 100 meters and mixed with intensely hot white light, was hurled into the sky by Shin Qingzhu from the ground, shooting straight toward the 2 rapidly ascending figures. The blazing fireball rapidly enlarged in the insect disaster's eyes. Her pupils suddenly constricted. Boom, boom, boom. A blinding light flashed across the night sky, And moments later, a deafening explosion roared like rolling thunder, causing the residents of Tokyo to cover their ears, their gazes filled with terror as they looked up at the sky. Under the night sky, the fire wave spread out, engulfing all of Tokyo. A massive mushroom cloud rose slowly. Shin Qingzhu stood beneath the dazzling fire wave, calmly gazing at the spot where the two figures were engulfed by the flames, slowly raising the cigarette that had been pinched between his left hand to his mouth. Shin Qingzhu exhaled a long plume of smoke, finally relaxing. The flickering firelight in the sky cast a red hue on Shin Qingzhu, and amidst the whirlwind raised by the explosion, the flowing clouds of his feathered coat rustled. He calmly took a drag from the cigarette, exhaling a cloud of smoke. Behind him, countless members of the Black Kill team watched this scene, their eyes slightly narrowing. Great leader is awesome. Great leader is amazing. Cheers echoed through the sky. On the other side, the disease disaster and Jelon were locked in a frenzied battle within the fog of plague, both sides leaving behind trails of afterimages. Suddenly, the earth-shattering explosion erupted above everyone's heads, and the corners of the disease disaster's mouth began to twitch uncontrollably. Another divine punishment from the Thunder Beast, another supernuclear bomb. Each one made his heart race. The most critical point was that these lethal methods were not originally possessed by the Nightfall team. The divine punishment from the Thunder Beast was a result of Bailey Pang Pang disarming the weapon spirit and cleverly directing the punishment onto the disease disaster, while the supernuclear bomb was formed by Zhang Air controlling the fire disaster and compressing it madly. They were using the power of human circles to deal with human circles. What the hell are you monsters? At this rate, the entire Tokyo will be destroyed by you today. In this brief moment of distraction, Jialon seized the opportunity, suddenly sidestepping and delivering a flying kick that sent the disease disaster flying several dozen meters, crashing heavily into a nearby shop. Without pausing, Jialon charged forward, grabbing the embedded sky piercer, and thrusting it into the shop where the disease disaster had been knocked into. A thick golden beam of light instantly carved a gaping hole in the street. The disease disaster barely avoided the blow, slowly rising from the rubble, looking at Jialon as if she were some kind of monster. No matter how terrifying the disease was, it couldn't inflict any harm on this girl, which meant that in her presence his abilities had completely lost their effectiveness, forcing him to rely solely on basic close combat to entangle with her. The body of the Oracle had been modified, and the powerful close combat program was embedded in the light circle of its left eye. Generally speaking, it wouldn't fear any close combat. But the key was that this girl simply wouldn't get hurt. No matter how much the Oracle could take a beating, it was still just taking a beating, but for Jialon it was far more than that. In their frenzied close-quarters combat, it seemed that the disease disaster had the upper hand, but as time passed he would inevitably give Jialon an opening and suffer damage. If this continued, he would surely lose. Come again. Unlike the frowning disease disaster, Jialon was completely caught up in the fight, brandishing her golden spear, her eyes filled with fighting spirit as she charged toward the disease disaster. With no other choice, the disease disaster could only engage her once more. Meanwhile, outside this battlefield shrouded in purple mist, and Qingyu stood on the rooftop of a building across the street, watching the two fight madly in the fog, a bitter smile appearing on his lips. He wasn't skilled in close combat and his level was far inferior. Even if he rushed into the battlefield now, he wouldn't be of much help. All he could do was manipulate the purple mist to envelop Jialon and the disease disaster, ensuring that the disease disaster's plague wouldn't escape and affect the battles of others. At that moment he seemed to sense something and turned to look in a certain direction. At the end of the dimly lit road, a man dressed in a black sequined suit, with a wilted rose tucked into his pocket, was slowly walking toward him while coughing. A golden long knife hung at his waist. Illusory eye. You've come. And Qingyu was not surprised to see him. Of course. Uncle Jingxia weakly lifted his head, looking at the disease disaster in the purple mist. My son's life is in his hands. Chapter 755. Kaisuke's pain. Your physical condition. And Qingyu squinted at Uncle Jingxia, a hint of gray flashing in her eyes as she instantly analyzed his body. The aftereffects left from the previous battle, Uncle Jingxia said with a bitter smile. How could it be this serious? And Qingyu's brows furrowed tighter, 6 terminal illnesses, 14 viruses. Your body is already beyond saving. Can you cure me? I'm a scientist, not a miracle healer. And Qingyu shook her head. The viruses in your body have far exceeded what modern science can handle. If you let me dissect you and try to inject some special reagents or mutated genomes to turn you into a test subject, there might be a chance for survival, but the odds are slim and you could end up turning into a monster. After all, I've never conducted human experiments on anyone other than myself. To be honest, given your current physical condition, it would be very difficult for you to survive my experimental process. And Qingyu was speaking the truth. Since she obtained the only correct answer, the most she had experimented on were mice and then herself. After repeated analyses and experiments, her body had basically transcended the category of human, possessing super regenerative abilities and the power of duplication. Even if she failed to modify herself and died, she would have the chance to start over. However, how to use these special powers to modify a normal person's physique was her knowledge blind spot. Of course, if given enough time to research, she could find a way to modify Uncle Jingxia's body and extend his life. But Uncle Jingxia didn't have much time left. Science is not something that can be achieved overnight. I understand. Uncle Jingxia nodded calmly, shifting his gaze to the plague disaster on the battlefield. In any case, I need him to create that kind of reagent. Please give me some time. Sure. And Qingyu nodded. But first we need to subdue him. Leave it to me. Uncle Jingxia stepped forward, slowly walking into the plague fog. And Qingyu opened her mouth, wanting to remind him not to go in, but ultimately closed it again. Given Uncle Jingxia's current physical condition, whether or not he entered that fog was no longer important. Since this was his long-held wish, and Qingyu felt it was inappropriate to obstruct him. Moreover, Uncle Jingxia's involvement could resolve this battle more quickly. Ding! As Uncle Jingxia stepped into the plague fog, the misty eye, at his waist unsheathed with a crisp sound. At the same time, the plague disaster, engaged in a fierce battle with Jialon in the fog, heard the sound and felt a flash before his eyes. Everything around him plunged into darkness, and Jialon's figure instantly faded from his sight. Boom! A sharp pain shot through one side of his body, and in the complete absence of visibility, the destructive light beam from the Heavenly Gate spear instantly tore through one of his arms. Agonizing pain surged in the plague disaster's heart. Misty Eye? Yushiheisha. Are you nearby? This wasn't the first time the plague disaster had experienced the illusions brought by Misty Eye. After being injured and feeling pain, he quickly reacted and shouted at his surroundings. Uncle Jingxia, gripping the golden long knife, merged into the fog, calmly gazing at him without speaking. Bang! Seeing the plague disaster lose his resistance and combat power drastically, Jialon knew the opportunity had come. As she retracted her spear, she delivered a heavy punch to the plague disaster's jaw. The immortal fist collided with his metallic bones, producing a piercing hum, sending him flying into the sky. The plague disaster flew about 10 meters in the air before crashing heavily to the ground. At this moment, the illusion enveloping the plague disaster had not dissipated. The weakness of Misty Eye lay in the fact that it was a non-combat knife. Once the wielder harbored any intent to kill, the target would break free from the illusion and return to normal. However, after being beaten, the plague disaster remained in the illusion. This was because Uncle Jingxia bore no intent to kill. It was Jialon who wanted him dead. A muffled sound echoed as Jialon kicked the plague disaster again, causing him to spit out several mouthfuls of blood. In this state, Jialon could easily thrust her spear and directly pierce through the plague disaster's skull. But Qingyu had already told her to spare the plague disaster's life until Uncle Jingxia spoke. So now she was only using close combat to frantically weaken the plague disaster's combat power. Ha ha. After taking several punches from Jialon, the plague disaster seemed to realize something and laughed heartily. I understand. Yushiheisha. I know what you want to do. Your son has been away from my reagent for so long. He should be close to death, right? Let me guess, is he already unconscious and all his bodily functions are rapidly deteriorating? Is he going to die? So you came here wanting to get the gamma reagent from me to save Yuji Longbai and extend your son's life. Bang! Jialon landed another punch on the plague disaster's face, sending him flying, his body embedding into a wall behind him, dust rising everywhere. Uncle Jingxia's grip on Misty Eye tightened unconsciously, his knuckles turning white as he stared intently at the plague disaster, his body trembling uncontrollably. He was struggling to control his intent to kill. The plague disaster was well aware of Misty Eye's weakness. He was deliberately using words to provoke Uncle Jingxia, hoping to incite his killing intent. Only then could he turn the tide from this extremely passive situation. It's useless if you don't speak. I know you're right here. From the gap in the wall, the plague disaster struggled to lift his head. His metallic jaw had been somewhat deformed by Jialan's blows, but he was still smiling. Yuji Heijia, let me tell you, even if I die here today, I will never make the gamma reagent for you. Yuji Longbai is the ultimate weapon we cultivated. If our oracle falls, he will never survive alone. Your Yuji family will never have a good ending. Crack. Veins bulged on Uncle Jingxia's hand gripping Misty Eye, while his other hand clenched into a fist, emitting a low hum. A trickle of blood oozed from the corner of Uncle Jingxia's mouth. His teeth had been crushed, yet he still forced himself to swallow it down. He glared at the plague disaster's maniacal face, the fire of rage burning fiercely in his eyes. He suddenly raised the golden long knife in his hand and stabbed it into his own shoulder. Crimson blood flowed down the blade of the golden long knife, dripping onto the ground. Under the torment of excruciating pain, Uncle Jingxia struggled to maintain his sanity amidst the fury, controlling his breath, forcibly suppressing the rising intent to kill within him. He held it back. Uncle Jingxia slowly closed his eyes, gradually pulling Misty Eye out from his shoulder. Chapter 756. True Theocracy. As long as he wanted, he could kill the disease disaster that had already been beaten half to death by Jialan at any moment. But he couldn't do that. He had to make the disease disaster produce a reagent that could save his son before he could kill him. Reason had to triumph over anger. Although Jialan couldn't understand what the two were saying, it didn't stop her from continuing to fight. She grabbed the disease disaster's neck with one hand and pressed him to the ground, her fair right hand clenched into a fist, raining down blows on the disease disaster beneath her. Bang, 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 bang. As Jialan's fists fell, the ground beneath the disease disaster cracked with menacing spiderweb-like fissures. His metallic skeleton was gradually deformed from the blows, ultimately resembling a broken toy, being pounded deep into the ground, effectively losing its ability to move. Boom. With Jialan's final punch, the disease disaster's brain buzzed, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Seeing this, Jialan slowly retracted her fists, stood up from the dust-filled pit and dusted off her hands, wearing an expression of accomplishment. Thank you for your hard work. Uncle Jingxia said, his face pale, forcing a smile at Jialan. Jialan understood this sentence. During her time in the fog of Japan, Wu Xiangnan had given her a crash course in basic Japanese. She smiled back and replied, "You're welcome." Uncle Jingxia turned his gaze to the disease disaster, who was knocked out on the ground, and slowly and firmly walked toward him, gripping the blood-stained golden long knife. "Can you do it?" And Qingyu's voice came from behind him. "Perhaps." Uncle Jingxia nodded slightly. "When he wakes up, he will realize he is trapped in the illusion of misty eyes. No matter what kind of illusion I use to guide him, he won't act according to my wishes. But now that he is unconscious and his awareness is in a daze, it will be easier. Next, I will use misty eyes to create an illusion that is extremely close to reality, guiding him step by step to produce that reagent. For a professional gigolo, conducting psychological guidance and suggestion is not a difficult task. It sounds like a big project." And Qingyu's gaze swept over Uncle Jingxia's body, frowning as she asked, "Is your body capable of supporting you through this illusion?" Uncle Jingxia stood before the disease disaster, blood dripping from the edge of the golden long knife, gradually pooling into a puddle on the ground. In the blood pool, Uncle Jingxia's pale face was reflected, his lips slightly curling up. "Youth," he spoke slowly, "never underestimate any father." Under Tokyo Tower. Amidst the shattered fragments of Pure Land, the tattered black-robed hell disaster emerged from the flames, his right arm somewhat deformed and nearly one-third of his upper body severed. Black metallic bones supported his body, creaking and buzzing amidst the flesh. Lin Chia unleashed the full power of 5 katsu knives, directly slicing the Pure Land, along with half of Hell Disaster's body into fragments. The light ring in Hell Disaster's left eye flickered, his gaze fixed on the figure emerging from the darkness, wielding 5 knives, a look of resentment appearing on his face. Lin Chia's strike had completely shattered the divine authority before everyone's eyes. The Pure Land collapsed and both the armament disaster and insect disaster fell, leaving only him and the disease disaster struggling to hold on. However, it seemed that soon he would be the only one left. This scene spread to every corner of the human circle, and from now on, their divine envoys could no longer dominate the living as they once did. In this battle, the divine envoys were utterly defeated. It seems the outcome is clear. Lin Chia, clad in a black trench coat, walked through the flickering flames to stand before Hell Disaster, his burning golden eyes looking down at him as he spoke softly. The dazzling era created by your divine envoys has come to an end. From now on, this human circle will sink into the eternal night brought by nightfall, until its final demise. To redeem the millions of tragic souls, the country's power supply had been reduced by 92%, and it could no longer return to the prosperous and vibrant modern city it once was. Whenever night fell, darkness would become the main theme here. This was the balance created by the Nightfall team, where the living and the dead coexisted. I admit we divine envoys have indeed lost. Hell Disaster supported his tattered body, a chilling glint reigniting in his lifeless eyes. But the divine authority still exists. Do you really think that we divine envoys can represent the divine authority of this world? Do you really believe that by defeating us, you have gained the entire human circle? Lin Chia's brow furrowed slightly. You were right before. We are merely capitalists who seized the opportunity to soar after the fog descended. Ultimately, we are just humans. The reason we conducted our experiments frantically was to break free from the shackles of being human and become a higher existence. Unfortunately, we could not become gods. But the gods have always been here. Hell Disaster raised his hand, pointing to the night sky filled with thunderclouds. In the night sky, a massive, menacing deep blue beast lay at the edge of the thunderclouds, angrily roaring at the city below. Though it is not a true deity, its power far exceeds what humanity can reach. Here it is the true messenger of the gods, Hell Disaster said indifferently, his eyes gradually growing colder. When the situation in the human circle surpasses the final bottom line, it will completely lose control and begin to cleanse everything here according to the orders given to it by the gods of Takamagara back in the day. It is the cleaner of this human circle. Lin Chia's brow furrowed even tighter. What exactly are you trying to say? Guess what I just referred to as the final bottom line? Hell Disaster's lips curled slightly as he pointed to his own heart. It is the divine envoys. Once the life signs of the 7 divine envoys disappear or go missing, it will activate the cleaner mode, using divine punishment to destroy all chaos. And as the source of chaos, Tokyo will be its target for extermination. In other words, if we die, you and the millions of people in Tokyo will have to accompany us to the grave. Lin Chia's heart sank immediately. He looked up at the massive beast lying between the thunderclouds, gazing down at the human world, a serious expression flashing across his brow. He had previously wondered why this thunder beast, as the executor of divine punishment, would sit idly by while the Pure Land shattered and the divine envoys died. Even if it had divine concealment to mask its presence, it should have sensed that something was wrong and intervened, right? Now Lin Chia understood that it wasn't that the Thunder Beast didn't want to help the divine envoys, but in the eyes of the Thunder Beast, the divine envoys were merely humans imprisoned in the human circle. Just like shepherd dogs among a flock while they managed the entire pasture, they were ultimately all livestock. It had no interest in the games of conflict among livestock. Unless all the shepherd dogs died and the flock fell into complete chaos, this lazy farm owner would personally step in to suppress all the sheep. From beginning to end, there was only one true representative of divine authority in the human circle. The Yata Mirror Spirit, the Thunder Beast. Chapter 757, Reagents in Hand. And Qingyu stood to the side, waving her hand to stir the surrounding purple mist, sending the enveloped plague upwards into the sky. Although the plague had fallen into a coma, the viruses contained within the miasma still existed. If the plague were allowed to spread unchecked, not only would Lin Chia and the others be affected, but nearly 1/3 of the city's population would fall seriously ill. The best solution was to wrap that mass of gas and elevate it to a high altitude, then use an explosion to completely eradicate the viruses within. Meanwhile, sitting beside the comatose plague, Uncle Jingjie tightly gripped his golden long knife, his eyes closed, beads of sweat seeping from his forehead, his face extremely pale. He was activating the illusory eye, creating an illusion for the comatose plague. Before him, the plague lying on the ground showed slight changes in expression. Sometimes angry, sometimes hesitant, sometimes confused, sometimes joyful. The plague was gradually succumbing to the illusion. "And Qingyu, is there anything else you need me to do?" Jialon asked, holding a golden spear, puzzled. And Qingyu glanced at the two people in the distance for a moment and shook her head. "No need. Their grievances should be handled by themselves." Jialon nodded and looked up at the thunder beast roaring at the ground amidst the thunderclouds, lost in thought. Time passed second by second. Uncle Jingjie, sitting on the ground, began to tremble uncontrollably, as if every muscle in his body was straining. His eyes had opened, now shimmering with a mesmerizing golden hue, fixed intently on the plague before him. At this moment he was not merely creating an illusion for the plague. The body of the oracle was modified, a combination of flesh and machinery. Although the plague was in a coma, the back-end system in his left eye was still operational, constantly monitoring the plague's physical condition by vitamins and supplements. To make the plague completely fall into the illusion, he had to simultaneously hypnotize the plague's will and the electronic machinery in his left eye. Uncle Jingjie was nearing his limit. Just as he was about to collapse, the comatose plague slowly sat up from the ground. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, as if he had seen something delightful. His hands slowly rose, rubbing together in the void. Points of deep blue light emerged from his palms, gathering towards the center of his hands. Countless pathogens were deconstructed and reassembled, gradually solidifying into a small mass of deep blue liquid, suspended in the air. Seeing this, Qingyu's eyes lit up. She took out a test tube from her pocket and stepped forward to collect the liquid. The deep blue liquid swayed against the transparent wall of the test tube. A hint of gray flashed in Qingyu's eyes as she began to analyze the data of this liquid. After a moment, she nodded at Uncle Jingjie beside her. "This is it, it's sufficient." Uncle Jingjie, exhausted and drained, had bloodshot eyes. Upon hearing Qingyu's words, a glimmer of joy flashed in his gaze. But soon that joy vanished. The golden hue in his eyes did not fade. He slowly turned his head to look at the plague sitting on the ground, smiling as if in paradise, and his expression gradually turned cold. Now the plague had lost its value. Uncle Jingjie activated the illusory eye, slowly guiding the plague immersed in joy into another illusion. A cruel, terrifying illusion capable of tearing apart and incinerating the dignity of the oracle. The smile on the plague's face froze. Then a look of terror appeared on his face as if he were enduring some extreme pain. Uncle Jingjie used the illusory eye to support his body, unsteadily standing up from the ground, his golden eyes coldly gazing down at the plague, lost in a painful illusion. He raised his hand, slowly bringing the golden long knife towards the plague's chest. "Descend into hell," Uncle Jingjie spoke coldly. The moment the blade touched the plague's body, the plague suddenly awoke from the nightmare, drenched in cold sweat, still dazed. A cold blade had already pierced into his heart. Uncle Jingjie twisted the illusory eye, mercilessly stirring the plague's heart. The remnants of pain from the nightmare still lingered on the plague's face. In the next moment, his life was ruthlessly extinguished, his eyes wide with terror, filled with unwillingness and resentment as he stared at Jingjie. Slash. Uncle Jingjie withdrew the golden long knife, casually splattering the blood on the blade onto the ground. The golden hue in his eyes gradually faded. He had killed the plague. As the golden light completely faded, Uncle Jingjie swayed, nearly collapsing to the ground. He bent over, coughing violently, each cough bringing forth a large amount of blood. "Jialon, throw him into the sky as high as you can." And Qingyu, not having time to check on Jingjie's condition, immediately instructed Jialon. Without hesitation, Jialon stepped forward, grabbed the plague by the collar and forcefully hurled him towards the sky. The plague's body soared into the night sky under the terrifying kinetic energy. The light in his left eye flickered violently, and seconds later, a blinding fireball erupted, illuminating a vast expanse of the sky once more. Under the surging fire above, Uncle Jingjie stood up from the pool of blood, sheathing the illusory eye, and walking towards Qingyu. It's the gamma serum and there's plenty of it. Qingyu handed him the test tube in her hand. After your son drinks this, it will allow him to maintain his condition for a long time. Once I thoroughly research and resolve his genetic defects and develop the corresponding serum, this issue can be addressed. Uncle Jingjie took the serum, remaining silent for a moment, his eyes filled with complexity as he looked at Qingyu. Why are you helping me so much? Buy vitamins and supplements. Qingyu raised an eyebrow. Helping you is also helping myself. I am quite interested in the so-called God-making experiment. Before Uncle Jingjie could change his expression, Qingyu continued, but rest assured I am not as deranged as the oracle. I will only conduct experiments on myself. I will never touch your son, at most just need 2 vials of his blood. Upon hearing this, Uncle Jingjie finally relaxed. Moreover, I also have a father. Qingyu paused for a moment before speaking again. Although I can't save you, at least I have the ability to keep your son alive. What I can do for a father is only this much. Uncle Jingjie looked into Qingyu's eyes, and after a long while, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Thank you. You're welcome. Uncle Jingjie took a deep breath, tightly gripping the test tube in his hand, and turned to walk towards a certain direction in the city. Come with me, I'll take you to meet my son. Without hesitation, Jialon stepped forward, grabbed the plague by the collar and forcefully hurled him towards the sky. The plague's body soared into the night sky under the terrifying kinetic energy. The light in his left eye flickered violently, and seconds later, a blinding fireball erupted, illuminating a vast expanse of the sky once more. Under the surging fire above, Uncle Jingjie stood up from the pool of blood, sheathing the illusory eye, and walking towards Qingyu. It's the gamma serum and there's plenty of it. Qingyu handed him the test tube in her hand. After your son drinks this, it will allow him to maintain his condition for a long time. Once I thoroughly research and resolve his genetic defects and develop the corresponding serum, this issue can be addressed. Uncle Jingjie took the serum, remaining silent for a moment, his eyes filled with complexity as he looked at Qingyu. Why are you helping me so much? Buy vitamins and supplements. Qingyu raised an eyebrow. Helping you is also helping myself. I am quite interested in the so-called God-making experiment. Before Uncle Jingjie could change his expression, Qingyu continued, but rest assured I am not as deranged as the oracle. I will only conduct experiments on myself. I will never touch your son, at most just need 2 vials of his blood. Upon hearing this, Uncle Jingjie finally relaxed. Moreover, I also have a father. Qingyu paused for a moment before speaking again. Although I can't save you, at least I have the ability to keep your son alive. What I can do for a father is only this much. Uncle Jingjie looked into Qingyu's eyes, and after a long while, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Thank you. You're welcome. Uncle Jingjie took a deep breath, tightly gripping the test tube in his hand, and turned to walk towards a certain direction in the city. Come with me, I'll take you to meet my son. Chapter 758. Release of the Thunder Beast. Under the Tokyo Tower. The body afflicted by disease and disaster bursts into brilliant fireworks in the night sky not far away, scattering like meteor showers across the city. Lin Chia's expression grows even more serious upon witnessing this scene. It seems that I am the only oracle left now. The face of the calamity has lost all traces of anger, instead appearing as calm as an abyss. Since the destruction of the Pure Land, he has known that the oracle has been completely finished. Since that is the case, there is no need for him to uphold any so-called divine authority. He feels as if he has returned to before the mist descended, becoming the chairman of the Pure Land Group, a capitalist yearning to touch the divine. When Yuzuri Takahaku appeared, he once thought he was close to the divine. But now he realizes that humanity is, after all, just humanity. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Lin Chia places his hands on the hilt of his sword at his waist and speaks calmly. As long as you don't die, the Thunder Beast won't be activated. I will trap you in this human circle forever. Until the arrival of destruction. The arrival of destruction? The calamity is unaware of the plans of the upper evil society. Nor does he know that the current human circle in Takamagara has become the center of a world storm. To him, the only threats facing the human circle now are Lin Chia and a few others. Lin Chia shakes his head, showing no intention of explaining to the calamity. In an instant he draws Zhanbai and vanishes into thin air. The surroundings immediately fall into a dead silence. The calamity squints his eyes. No matter what means he employs, he cannot locate Lin Chia's position. He simply closes his eyes and stands still. Whoosh! A streak of black blade light cuts through the void, stopping just before the calamity's throat. Lin Chia grips Zhanbai in one hand and Haistring in the other, his brow furrowing tightly. Why don't you dodge? Why should I dodge? The calamity sneers. That strike you made with the 5 Huijin blades has already destroyed most of my body. The other oracles have perished as well. If this continues, I won't be your match. Come on, kill me. Let me witness what it looks like when the spirit weapon Thunder Beast destroys the world. Lin Chia looks into the calamity's indifferent eyes, his brow slightly furrowing. You've gone mad. No, I'm not mad. The calamity shakes his head. If you stood above all beings looking down on them for 100 years, witnessing the changes and developments of human society, you would grow weary too. The world of humanity is too small, too boring. Day after day, year after year, always toiling for those few laughable things. Money, power, reproduction. Like leeches, waves of them are born, floating and sinking in society like ants, envying what they cannot have and wanting more of what they do. Although there are indeed some different people who crawl through this muddy world while holding on to their original intentions, so what? In just a few decades, they ultimately become a handful of yellow earth. Humans are just like that. The calamity slowly raises his head, looking at the thunder beast crouching in the thunderstorm, and speaks calmly. I have grown weary of this for 100 years. I no longer want to see this boring human world, nor do I want to live so emptily. If I cannot become a god in one day, I cannot escape this sea of suffering. But in this 100 years, the only thing I have learned is, humanity ultimately has an end. Humans can never become gods. Since I cannot become a god, there is no need for me to continue struggling. At least, I want to see that unattainable, divine power once more before I die. As the calamity's words fall, a glimmer of brilliance flashes in his lifeless eyes. He quickly raises his right hand and presses it against his chest. Lin Chia's pupils suddenly constrict. He quickly reacts, wanting to stop the calamity's actions, but several black prison bars shoot up from the ground, hindering his steps. In that instant, the calamity's right hand plunges into his shattered body, breaking 2 deformed black steel bones, and grasps the pulsating crimson heart. He crushes it with force. In an instant, the light in his left eye contracts and black prison bars shoot up from the ground, deeply embedding themselves into the calamity's body, like an inescapable cage trapping him tightly within. Blood splatters out and his vitality rapidly dissipates. His heart has stopped beating. In his lifeless body, only his eyes remain, still shining brightly. His consciousness is still present. In the moment of ending his own life, he used his ability to create a cage to imprison his soul, briefly maintaining his consciousness. This cage not only imprisoned his consciousness but also locked the self-destruct system in his left eye. The black circle in his eyeball rapidly faded, ultimately collapsing into darkness like a screen losing power. Just as he said, he wants to witness the arrival of the divine miracle. Seeing this, Lin Chia's expression darkens immediately, and he looks up at the sky. The thunder beast, crouching among the clouds, seems to sense something and slowly stands up from the cloud. Its gaze sweeps across the human realm, and in its indifferent, calm pupils, blinding lightning bursts forth. Roar. The roar of the thunder beast echoes across the sky. Hiss. On the other side, Bai Li Pangpang hears the roar from the clouds, his body stiffening as he gasps in shock. What's wrong with you? Chao Yuan has exited his frenzied state, sheathing his straight sword. Seeing Bai Li Pangpang's change in color, he asks in confusion. Bai Li Pangpang looks up at the deep blue giant beast standing from the clouds, his expression somewhat stiff. He swallows hard and speaks hoarsely. This is bad. Why is it coming down? Who? That spirit weapon. Bai Li Pangpang points at the thunder beast about to leap down from the clouds and says, in the past, no matter how I teased it, it would just stay in the clouds, at most spitting down at the ground. Damn it, why is it coming down now? I used to pull its tail a lot. If it comes down, it will probably be the first to settle the score with me. Bai Li Pangpang is now filled with regret, immense regret. When he first arrived in this country, he discovered the existence of the Thunder Beast when he first used the Forbidden Ruins. However, after realizing that the Thunder Beast was actually a spirit weapon, things began to develop in a strange direction. His ability to disarm everything could affect the spirit of the Yata mirror. Although it couldn't harm it, every time Bai Li Pangpang used his ability, it was as if an invisible hand suddenly tugged at the Thunder Beast's tail, making it furious. At first, Bai Li Pangpang was somewhat restrained, but later, when he discovered that the Thunder Beast wouldn't jump down from the clouds, he became increasingly reckless. Chapter 759. Please let me die in peace. During that time, Bai Li Pangpang would often provoke the Thunder Beast whenever he used the Forbidden Ruins for various reasons. He would take the opportunity to tease it, so to speak, making it a routine to pull its tail every 3 days or so, and every 5 days for a bigger tease, almost rubbing its tail bald. Whenever the Thunder Beast was about to unleash divine punishment, he would simply use the power of all things to pull its tail, deflecting its attack. Over time, Bai Li Pangpang became the number 1 on the Thunder Beast's kill list. Bai Li Pangpang had no doubt that if the Thunder Beast could jump down from the clouds, it would be the first to stomp him to death. Isn't it that serious? Chao Yuan looked up at the storm clouds. I think since you provoked it so much before and it didn't come down, it shouldn't this time either. Whoosh. Before Chao Yuan could finish his sentence, the deep blue giant beast above the swirling lightning clouds suddenly exerted its limbs, carrying endless thunder and fierce winds, and rapidly descended to the ground with a roar. Chao Yuan was left speechless. It's over. Bai Li Pangpang's expression turned rigid. That thing is not something we can handle. Somewhere in Tokyo, Uncle Jingjie walked through the deserted, remote streets and arrived at an open space. He reached for the mysterious eye at his waist, and a faint golden light flickered from the blade. In the void of the open space, a small house appeared. And Qingyu watched this scene with a look of surprise in his eyes. It was the first time he had seen the power of the mysterious eye with his own eyes. Even before the illusion was dispelled, his only correct answer couldn't detect anything unusual here, which showed just how terrifying the power of this blade truly was. If given the chance, he really wanted to study this blade thoroughly. And Qingyu's gaze towards the mysterious eye grew fervent. Uncle Jingjie led Qingyu and Jelon into the house, quickly stepping inside. The room was clean and tidy. Although there were many ingredients and snacks on the surrounding tables, it didn't appear messy. It seemed Uncle Jingjie paid great attention to the cleanliness of his home. And Qingyu took a quick look around the room and finally focused on the white-haired boy lying on the bed. He saw Yuzuri Takahaku quietly lying on the bed, his long snow-white hair cascading from the pillow to the floor. His brow was tightly furrowed, his face devoid of color, and even his breathing was extremely weak. And Qingyu walked to his side, a hint of gray flashing in his eyes. Indeed, it's a genetic defect outbreak, just as I expected. After confirming Yuzuri Takahaku's condition, Qingyu nodded. So I gave him the medicine? Yes. Receiving Qingyu's affirmative answer, Uncle Jingjie walked to the bedside, bringing the test tube he obtained from the disaster and holding it to Yuzuri Takahaku's lips, making him drink it. Then Uncle Jingjie sat by the bed, anxiously waiting. Boom. A terrifying roar echoed from the distant sky. And Qingyu and Jelon's expressions changed simultaneously as they rushed to the window to look outside. They saw the massive deep blue beast roaring with its mouth wide open amidst the swirling lightning clouds. Then it stomped heavily with its limbs in the clouds and fell directly from the sky. Thud! The enormous body of the thunder beast crashed to the ground, causing the entire surface of Tokyo to tremble violently. At the point of impact, all the small houses were crushed to pieces by an invisible shockwave, and the towering buildings shook violently before collapsing. Its arrival felt like the end of the world, and the people around went into a frenzy, fleeing in all directions. Thick smoke instantly obscured the sky. Seeing this scene, Qingyu's expression turned grave. Earlier, when Bai Li Pangpang had summoned this thunder beast, he had already used the only correct answer to analyze its strength. Although it was still not on par with the 2 true deities he had encountered in the mist, its level was definitely above the human ceiling. The spirit of a divine artifact could also be considered a mythological being in another sense. Such an existence coming down personally meant that within Tokyo, no, throughout the entire human realm, there might not be anyone capable of resisting it. This was a serious problem. Should we go help? Jalan looked at the location where the Thunder Beast had landed, which was near where Lin Chia had been, her eyes filled with worry. Let's go. And Qingyu pondered for a moment before decisively nodding. He absolutely could not let Lin Chia face that kind of monster alone. Although their Nightfall team, even if fully mobilized, would definitely not be able to withstand a single attack from the Thunder Beast, they couldn't just abandon their captain to escape. Moreover, just in that fleeting moment, Qingyu had already thought of a way. This method might be able to withstand the Thunder Beast's attack, or perhaps even kill it. However, this method was not very friendly to Cao Zai. But if they were truly pushed to a dead end, this might be their only way out. After a brief moment of hesitation, Qingyu stepped up to Uncle Jingjie and said, I've checked your son's condition. He has already taken the medicine and he should wake up soon. He will be fine. If all goes well this time, our team will leave here quickly. I estimate it will take me 3 to 4 months to create a medicine that can completely cure him. When the time comes, I will send someone to deliver the medicine to him so you can rest assured. Uncle Jingjie nodded. I believe you. And Qingyu replied with a then quickly walked to the door but paused. He turned back to look at Uncle Jingjie, who was sitting beside Yuzuri Takahaku, opened his mouth and finally asked, Are you really not considering becoming my test subject? If I inject you with the stiffening agent now, you might still have a chance to survive. Even if the chance is small, it's better than having none. Uncle Jingjie saw the seriousness in Qingyu's eyes and a faint smile appeared on his pale lips. As for me, I've lived my life as a gigolo, enjoying a lifetime of glory. I'm used to being carefree. In the end, I don't want to die like a monster. Especially in front of my own son. Uncle Jingjie turned his head, gently stroking the forehead of the unconscious Yuzuri Takahaku, a tender smile appearing on his lips. Please allow me to die quietly as a qualified father. Upon hearing these words, Qingyu's pupils trembled slightly. He stood at the door for a long time before finally nodding. I understand, he said, then farewell. Uncle Jingjie smiled at him. Farewell, and I wish you a smooth journey home. And Qingyu took one last look at him and, together with Jalan, stepped out the door. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the small house behind them quickly faded from the air, disappearing without a trace as if it had never existed.